Hey, everybody. It seems like the universe is really teaching me a lesson on leaning into imperfection. Because not only has this first episode been a full on test of my perfectionistic tendencies, I also have a cold with a little congestion. So, yeah, this is going to be raw and real. Don't worry, I promise I won't cough or sniffle. I know how that can get for those of you with misophonia. And for the folks crinkling their brow right now, wondering, what the heck is misophonia? Misophonia is a hypersensitivity to certain sounds, usually chewing or wet noises, but sometimes it's other stuff too. So, consider yourself safe in this listening space. Sniffle free, I promise. I wonder how many of you have had this experience. You know, when you have something you've been wanting to do your whole life, or okay, maybe not your whole life, but part of your life, and you finally start it. It's something you've been dreaming about. And every time you start writing or recording, it just doesn't seem good enough. And okay, fine, I'm talking about myself right now, and this podcast, and my relationship with perfect. I was so excited to start this podcast, and I couldn't wait to have conversations about the space between psychology and being human. And here's what I didn't expect. That inner critic got super loud once that mic turned on. And I'll be honest, a lot of this is scripted because if left to my own devices, I will go on some tangents. I digress. Back to the script. Suddenly, every pause felt too long. Every sentence too rehearsed or not rehearsed enough. I kept rewriting, re-recording, and re-listening. It was like chasing the horizon. The closer I got, the further away perfect seemed to move. I don't think I'm alone in that. So many of us who grew up being the people pleaser, the go-between, the sensitive one, learned early that the safest way to belong was to get it right. We learned that approval meant safety, that being easy to love meant staying calm, staying small, staying composed. And underneath it all was this unspoken fear that if I mess up, people won't accept me, they won't love me, and I won't belong. So we got really good at reading the room, at predicting needs, at apologizing before we'd even done anything wrong. That vigilance, that became our way of staying close, staying safe, and staying enough. And here's the truth. Perfectionism is just an adaptation turned painful habit. Okay, hold up. I'm about to go off script here. Let me just stand right up on my soapbox. There is so much external pressure to be perfect. Folks on Instagram with the perfect family, the perfect house, the perfect wedding, or the perfect relationship. That person's son even got into an Ivy League school. How perfect. Then there's Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie, American Eagle. Models whose clothing fits perfectly. And it seems like every Martha Stewart dish looks like it has a publicist. I mean, I could go on. I think you get the point. The problem is, the more and more we compare ourselves to other people, the more and more we chase the enoughness. Because being more perfect doesn't actually equal joy. There will always be someone who has more of what we want. Better house, more money, smarter, shorter, taller, funnier. So the more you chase it, the further away it gets. I digress because perfectionism is really about avoiding judgment, avoiding criticism, avoiding chaos, and just fitting in. I could go on a whole tangent about fitting in and belonging, but I won't. I'll save that for another time. Here's the thing about perfectionism. It's sneaky. It doesn't always look like a perfectly organized planner, a color-coded binder, or perfectly clean countertops. And I just want to say that often kids come to me with diagnosis of ADHD because they can't get started or they can't finish things. And I actually believe often this is perfectionism at its best, or worst, however you look at it. So you parents out there who get super frustrated with your kids who just can't seem to get it together, and for those of us who just can't seem to get it together, listen up. Because the cycle of perfectionism, procrastination, and paralysis is vicious. And I'll scratch the surface on the three types of perfectionism. We have self-oriented perfectionism, and that's directing exceedingly high, often unrealistic standards towards yourself. This can be associated with positive traits like conscientiousness and motivation, but also self-criticism and depression when those goals aren't met. Then there's the other-oriented perfectionism, and that's holding others to high, sometimes unreasonable standards and being overly critical or judgmental when others fail to meet those expectations. The obvious outcome of this is strained relationships. Then there's the socially prescribed perfectionism, the belief that others, family, society, workplace, hold you to unrealistic or realistic standards. And this is often the most maladaptive form linked to anxiety, feelings of helplessness, fear of rejection, and a chronic sense of inadequacy. And that's what I was alluding to before about comparison. Comparison, the thief of joy and the giver of anxiety. Okay, back to the vicious cycle of the three Ps. Perfectionism, setting impossible standards. Procrastination, delaying tasks due to fear of not meeting the impossible standards or fear of failure. And paralysis. This is the eventual result of that whole cycle, and this is where we become stuck, unable to start or complete the task, and then the project fails. And then we sink further into this feelings of inadequacy, of not enoughness. Now, there's a fourth one that is included in some models, and that's called people pleasing. And here's where my curious brain gets sidetracked and we go on a deep dive into perfectionism. Let's add two more to the mix. We have overachieving and the perfect running mate to perfectionism, self-sabotage. How did I get so off script here? This is why I said you can't leave me to my own devices. Okay, I'm catching my self-judgment here, and let's move on. I realized I haven't actually introduced myself. Hi, I'm Jessica Hayden, and I'm a recovering perfectionist. It literally took me 3 takes to do that. I have a BA in Human Development from SUNY Oswego. I have a master's degree in school psychology from East Carolina University, and I have a PhD in school psychology from UNC Chapel Hill. I've been a CrossFit coach, a bodybuilder, a rugby player and coach, and I have a license to practice massage therapy. Overachiever. So you see, perfectionism and I have a really good relationship. Going back to grad school at age 39 put my perfectionism to the test. Most of my peers were in their 20s, and some of them graduates of Harvard and Brown. And the last time I went to grad school, there was no Google. I'm sure they were annoyed with my inability to search for relevant publications and all the questions I had, and I, quite ashamed and overwhelmed. Social comparison. First of all, for those of you who don't know, I was a school psychologist for 13 years in Rochester, New York. At age 39, I left everything behind. I left my job of 13 years and the golden handcuff of a New York State pension, sold my house, said goodbye to friends and family, and moved across the country to pursue a PhD in school psychology at UNC Chapel Hill. So how does that qualify me to be a clinical practitioner, you ask? My training in school psychology has afforded me the ability to be able to understand educational testing, IQ testing, and how it relates to educational disabilities. However, the program at UNC Chapel Hill offers a different perspective of clinical training that most school programs do not. We had the opportunity to take classes outside of the education department at Duke, UNC, and NC State. I also received intensive practical training at a state-run psychiatric hospital, in clinical private practice, in a residential treatment facility for kids and teens, and a community outpatient clinic. That's on top of the intensive dialectical behavior therapy training, acceptance and commitment training, and intensive supervision, plus my own personal development through individual therapy. And I want to be clear, I'm not listing all of those for your acceptance. I think I'm listing all of those for your understanding, because it can be a little confusing when people say, wait a minute, you're a school psychologist, how come you're doing clinical work? Okay, so how does all of this relate to perfectionism? Earlier I said, I'm an overachiever. However, I also want to be very clear. I am a procrastinator and someone who gets really stuck in paralysis. Add a touch of ADHD to the mix and woof. The two are a combustible combination. I want to relate. Yes, I'm an overachiever, and yes, I have a gajillion unfinished projects. Okay, enough about me. What does perfectionism look like? How do we know if we're being perfectionistic or if we're just trying to complete something to our own standards? Buckle up. Some emotional and mental signs of perfectionism are constant self-criticism, replaying every mistake like a bad highlight reel, all or nothing thinking, this is either flawless or a failure. It's not good enough. Fear of judgment. You're not just trying to do your best, you're trying not to be seen getting it wrong. Procrastination in disguise. Well, we talked about this earlier. You wait for the perfect time, perfect plan, or perfect confidence before you start. Some behavioral signs of perfectionism are over-preparing, over-explaining, or overdoing. This is like doing it more than 5 or 6 times. Editing yourself out loud. Sorry, that didn't make sense. What I meant was endless tweaking. Projects never feel done, only paused for now. Speaking of endless tweaking, this is my 300th edit. Avoiding new things. If you might not be great right away, you'd rather not try. And here are some signs you might seek perfection in your relationships. You have high standards for others because if you can control the outcome, maybe then you can relax. Micromanagers, listen up. Difficulty delegating. It's easier if I just do it myself. People pleasing. The pursuit of being liked and masquerading as being good. And let's be clear, perfectionism is not OCD. We can talk about OCD in another episode. For those of you who don't know, OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. You can be highly perfectionistic and not have OCD. Okay, so here's a big question. How do we overcome perfectionism? All behavior change starts with awareness. So first, we have to be aware of that voice, the voice that says, you just have to get it right or else. Insert catastrophic event. I like to think of these as the catches, because if I can't catch it, there's nothing I can do about it. Catch it and thank it. Do what? Yeah, thank it. Say, hey, thanks. I'm glad you're here trying to protect me. I get it. You don't want to be judged. You don't want to be wrong. You don't want to be rejected. Offer it a little self-compassion. It's okay. You'll be all right. Then ask yourself, what would good enough look like right now? And pause. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid will happen if I get this wrong? Or if it's too messy or too whatever? Perfectionism is rarely about performance. It's about acceptance. It's about belonging. And then imagine it as if it did happen. We call this a cope ahead in DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. Walk yourself through it. Trust yourself. What would you do if you did get it wrong? Could you tolerate the pain? Now imagine yourself doing just that. Tolerating whatever it is that comes your way. Coping with it. Remind yourself, I've gotten through hard things before. I can get through this too. When you catch a mistake, say, that was really human of me. Over time, this rewires that shame loop into self-trust. And lastly, I think maybe the scariest of them all, send a text with a typo. Send an email with an unfinished response. Make mistakes on purpose. Not on a high consequence event, of course. Low consequence events. Text to friends. Emails to coworkers you trust. Post the unedited reel. The unedited picture. No filter, please. Speak before your thoughts are fully formed. Don't re-record your mix-up in a podcast. And let the world see the real you. Okay. So this first episode, it's not perfect. It's messy, raw, and probably a little over-explained. And it's real. And maybe that's the point, to stop chasing the version that would make everyone else comfortable and instead show up as the most humanly possible version of myself, the honest, fumbling, heart in progress version. Because the truth is, being understood doesn't come from saying it right. It comes from saying it real. So if you've ever found yourself rewriting that email 10 times, rehearsing what you'll say before hitting send, or avoiding the start because you're scared you won't do it perfectly, welcome. You're not alone here. Let's unlearn perfect together. Okay, let's get to the real question. The one I know you've all been dying to hear. Why Simply Heard? Why now? Maybe that was a little dramatic. I'm going to tell you anyway. The truth is, this has been living in my heart for years. I used to tell myself I was waiting for the right time. Then it was for the right co-host, the right mic, the right idea. You get what I'm trying to get at. But what I was really waiting for was permission. For someone to say, "You're ready." Someone to say, "Hey, you know what? You'd be good at that. People want to hear what you have to say." And then I realized no one was coming to give that permission slip. That person, the one I was waiting for, that was me. I was the one. And to be honest, I had a little help from a friend, thanks Mel, who pushed me and said, "Hey, why haven't you started that podcast yet?" And listen, this year has been a roller coaster. I opened Simply Centered Psychological Services, fell deeply in love with someone who reminded me home to my creativity and my softer side. I lost my sweet puppy, and then the relationship. It wasn't easy. It felt like I'd been cracked open, and the light touched parts of me I hadn't yet made peace with. It was messy, beautiful, and raw, and I found myself in this liminal stage, transformational. I felt pain and gratitude all at once, and I was reminded that healing isn't linear. Growth is messy, and we don't become whole by holding it all together. Simply Heard, the space between was born out of that. About a desire to create a place where we can talk honestly about being human. The messy, contradictory, in-between parts that we usually hide behind are polished versions. Because life, love, parenting, healing, none of it happens in black and white. It happens in the space between two truths. And that's where we're going to live on this podcast, in the space between stories and science, between fear and freedom, between what we thought we knew and what life keeps teaching us. In the upcoming weeks, you'll hear from people who've lived deeply and worked bravely. Clinicians, teachers, parents, creators, and humans who are still figuring it out, just like the rest of us. And if you're someone who thinks you've figured it all out, maybe you have. I'd encourage you to soften your edges, to lean into curiosity, and to consider the possibility that we're all still learning. Because if we think we've arrived, we've stopped listening. And the heart of this space, this whole podcast, is to listen differently. You'll hear from people who've spent their lives doing this work, in therapy rooms, classrooms, and everyday life. People who've walked through their own fire and come out with something to share. My guests have impressive resumes, absolutely. And here's the thing, anyone can spew facts. This isn't about credentials. It's about wisdom. It's about what you learn when you've lived it, when you've walked the talk and not always gotten it right. We're not robots or AI. We're human. And that's what makes us so special. We have the ability to make mistakes, to learn from them, and to grow into more caring, compassionate people. I can't wait to introduce you to my guests. We'll talk about the subtle ways our culture teaches us to judge bodies, including our own, and what it takes to unlearn that. Why change can feel threatening inside families, and how to stay grounded in your growth without losing compassion for theirs. This might be particularly useful as the holidays approach. We'll discuss modern-day parenting in a world where technology and social media seemingly trump real-life connection. You'll meet a dear friend of mine who was recently reunited with her biological family and how that experience has changed her life. We'll learn what it really means to be neurodivergent, to move through the world with a brain that doesn't fit the mold, to find acceptance in difference, and to replace shame with self-understanding. Why our boys and men need emotional connection now more than ever, and what healthy masculinity actually looks like. And yes, we'll even talk about medications, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, stimulants, and everything in between. What they do, what they don't, and how to know when it might be time to consider them. We'll talk about recovery, addiction, relationships, dating, and so much more. Lastly, the stories that opened us, the moments that brought clarity, growth, and a deeper sense of self. Because we all have them. Those moments that humbled us, stretched us, the moments that change everything. The guests you'll hear from aren't here to sound perfect. They're here to sound real. They're standing up to shame, swimming in their own vulnerability and sharing the lessons, the tools, the heartbreak, and the humor that got them through. This isn't a podcast about having the answers. It's about learning to ask better questions and to listen differently to ourselves, to each other, and to what's being said in the space between. So thank you for being here, for showing up as you are, because that's all we really need. A little honesty, a little courage, and a willingness to begin. And I think that's a good place to end today. If something in this episode made you pause, reflect, or breathe a little deeper, take it with you. That's the work. I'm honestly not sure who I'll be sitting with next, and I kind of love that. Because just like life, the best conversations aren't always planned. They unfold when we show up curious, imperfect, and willing to listen. So wherever you are, driving, walking, or hiding in your car between errands, thank you for being here, for being human, and for being part of this space. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who might need a reminder that perfection isn't the goal. Presence is. You can listen to Simply Heard, The Space Between on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you love to listen. And if you want to stay connected, come find me on Instagram or TikTok at Dr. Jess Hayden for daily reflections, behind-the-scene moments, and a deeper look into this work. I'm Dr. Jess Hayden, and this is Simply Heard, The Space Between. Take care and be easy on yourself. Simply Heard, The Space Between is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered therapy or a replacement for mental health treatment. If you're struggling or need support, please seek help from a licensed mental health professional in your state.